What's going on, everybody? It's Young Man. Today is March 16th, 2026. Today, we're going to be talking about Bitcoin, strategy, and Metaplanet, the three things that we've been talking about and will continue to talk about. Today, I got the strategy merch on, as you can see. I'm very excited about what strategy's been doing recently. So, in today's video, I'm going to mostly be talking about strategy. I first want to just mention strategy is now up to 760,000 Bitcoin. When I started making these videos, they had about 100,000 less Bitcoin than they do today. It's been a couple of months. I'm not sure people really grasp the scale that they're accumulating Bitcoin at, and I just want to shine some light on that today. So the first thing that I'll go into, I guess, would be that this week they announced a 22,000 Bitcoin buy just for this week, this last week. The week before that, they announced about 18,000 Bitcoin. So that is 40,000 Bitcoin in a matter of 2 weeks. That is absurd. The next treasury, or they're not a treasury company, but the next company on the list of Bitcoin holders, besides Marathon, because they're a minor, I'll leave them out. But Jack Mahler's 21 has 43 Bitcoin, and they're number three on the list of the world's companies that hold Bitcoin. Strategy purchased the amount that they hold in 2 weeks. There's a term, economies of scale. There's also a term, regulatory capture. All of all signs point to strategy having the characteristics of a monopoly. The most intelligent investors will all tell you the same thing. You invest in a monopoly before the public knows that it's a monopoly. That is why I make these videos. I make these videos because we have an asymmetric chance to do that. Some people understand where this is headed. Some people understand that strategy is going to be the world's issuer. They're going to have more collateral than everybody else, and they will issue debt to the world. They will provide bank accounts to the world. STRC, stretch, is strategy's fixed income product, I guess you could call it, but it's more of a bank account. They're marketing it as a bank account that pays you 11% because you give them your money, they buy Bitcoin with it, they hope to capture 20 to 30% per year on the Bitcoin that they buy, and they give you 11% of that. So a lot of people hear that and they think, well, why wouldn't I just buy the Bitcoin and appreciate the 20, 30%? It's a good point. That's what I do. If you're able to stomach the volatility, if that's something that interests you, is to get on the roller coaster and go along the ups and downs of Bitcoin, then you do that. But a lot of people's circumstances don't allow them to do that, or it's not something they're interested in. Examples would be retirees. Retirees don't want to have to go through 60% drawdowns that Bitcoin has. They want 11% on their cash paid monthly. That because that is the difference between being able to really watch your budget and not really have to. If you're a retiree with some money in the bank, you can give Saylor $200,000 and he will pay you $20,000 a year for nothing. That's enough to live on. For a lot of people, if you have your expenses covered, you have money where you need it, 20,000 a year, that's just money for fun. Like that type of thing is not, we've never seen that before. Money market funds will give you 3 or 4%, or I mean, 10-year bonds will give you 4%. A lot of fixed income products are not giving you even close to 11%. And because strategy has so much collateral and they've positioned themselves in the market to be able to pay such a high dividend, they do that. And that's Sailor's calling it their iPhone moment. Apple was already Apple before the iPhone. They already had the momentum that they needed to become a great success. But when the iPhone came out, that was something that could be packaged and put in everybody's hand. Everybody wanted the iPhone because if if you in your social circle see somebody has an iPhone and you are still using outdated technology that's nowhere near as clean and effective as the iPhone is, then you go and you get an iPhone because you're exposed to it and you then want it. Everybody now who has their money sitting in CDs and government bonds and these products that aren't nearly, not even half as good, mathematically, not even half as good as Stretch. If they're at their bingo night and someone says, "Yeah, my life savings that I worked 60 years for, I put them in something called Stretch, and now I'm getting 11.5% paid monthly on that." If they hear that, you don't really have to think very hard about whether or not you want to be part of that. If I told you I could give you double what you're getting right now in money, spendable money, you do it. You don't even have to think about it. That's why Stretch is the iPhone moment, and it's going to become that. It's going to take a little time to become that, but I believe that it will. And so what that means for strategy as a company is they're going to have the world's capital flowing into them to buy Bitcoin with, which then will have the world's capital flowing into Bitcoin. It's literally plumbing. It's plumbing for all the old money and all the money that is just sitting around not getting sufficient yield. It's the plumbing for that money to flow into Bitcoin and to pump my bags. That's why I'm making these videos, because if you're too late to being involved in this, it will be happening without you being involved. Another example, besides retirees, is corporations. It's a lot easier to convince your board, convince your CFO, your CEO to go put a bunch of money into Stretch and get 11% dividends than it is to convince them to put a bunch of money into Bitcoin and ride the volatility and stomach the drawdowns and have to try to time the market. It's a lot easier to convince them to become part of Bitcoin through this product. Because as time moves forward, people are going to see what's happening with Bitcoin, see what's happening with the digitalization of monetary rails and money, and they're going to want to be part of it. And the more people that wait, they're going to have less upside, but they still will eventually adopt. If you look at what curves of adoption look like, it's an S. And I believe that we're at the very start of the S. And it doesn't matter if you're late, you're earlier than you could be. That's the bottom line for these types of things. But I'm very excited about Stretch. I'm very excited about strategy. I personally don't own any Stretch because I don't have enough money. In my mind, owning MSTR common stock is how I'm going to accumulate enough money for something like Stretch to make sense for me. If I was 40 years older and I had accumulated capital and I had enough capital to be happy and secure, but I wanted just some extra cash flow, I would own Stretch. But I'm young and I have aspirations to be wealthy. So I'm putting my money into MSTR common stock and Bitcoin because I think that they're going to benefit from what's happening with Stretch. I just think that I'll be able to outpace an 11% yield with strategy that could very well run at like a 40 to 50 ARR, which to me, it just doesn't make sense for younger people with less money to be using Stretch. If you're sitting on a bunch of money, if you're young, then maybe Stretch makes sense for you. But I think there's better places to set my money at this point in my life. But that doesn't mean that I'm not benefiting from Stretch because Stretch is why MSTR was able to have these massive Bitcoin purchases this week, last week, even the week before. They've been accelerating how much capital that they can put into Bitcoin because Stretch is allowing them to raise it. And we're seeing more and more corporations putting Stretch on the balance sheet. It's actually it's interesting because other uh, Bitcoin treasury companies are now putting Stretch on their balance sheet. as kind of a hedge to still get some of the Bitcoin upside without having to stomach the drawdowns. But that's probably all I'll say about MSTR and Stretch. Um, I don't want this video to get too long. I'll probably make another video about MSTR specifically. But also, I just want to talk a bit about Bitcoin. There's so much going on in the world and in markets and uncertainty, and there's geopolitical conflict that is accelerating, and there's basically an energy crisis that is now being overlaid on top of the debt crisis that already is reaching its breaking point, you could say. And then there's also the deflationary aspect of AI. There's all these things that are all coming towards each other. And I believe it's not a good time to be long QQQ software stocks, even just US equity ETFs. Like none of this is financial advice, of course, but some exposure to something that is outside of the fiat system, some exposure to something that benefits from the inflation of currency, inflation of the dollar, that is probably wise in times like this. And a lot of people are calling for Bitcoin to go even lower. Nobody knows where it's going. All I can say is that when it was October and Bitcoin was fluctuating around $120,000, I was buying aggressively and I was wishing it was lower. And now it's $50,000 lower per coin. I'm not waiting for a bottom. I'm keeping some cash around just in case we see something like $45,000. So I have some cash to buy Bitcoin with, but I'm still buying my weekly MSTR share. I'm not waiting because 70,000 is a gift. Even if it's relatively high to where people think we might be headed, it's relatively low to where we've been, and it's relatively low to where we will be. If Bitcoin goes to $400,000, I will not be upset about aggressively buying at 70,000. None of this is financial advice. I just think that we're at a great time to become interested in this type of thing, to research, to start investing in MSTR and in Bitcoin if you don't already. Include Metaplanet in everything that I've said in this video. Include Metaplanet because Metaplanet is essentially MSTR of the East, you could say. Japan has different market mechanics. It's a different country. They're really the second biggest treasury company because on the list it goes Strategy, Mara, 21, and then Metaplanet. But Mara's a miner, and 21 hasn't bought any Bitcoin. They're a Bitcoin company, but they don't identify as a treasury company. So you could say Metaplanet is the second biggest treasury company, and if MSTR succeeds, I believe Metaplanet will. I think Metaplanet, since they're earlier in their development and they've been doing the strategy for less time, I think there might still be more upside for them in relation to strategy. That's why I have so much Metaplanet. And I also just like the dynamics in Japan and the way that their currency uh, is inflating faster than the US dollar is, and the way that their government bond crisis has already begun. I'm not saying that I like that that's happening. I'm saying I like that for the future prospect of Metaplanet and what they'll be able to do in that environment. So, none of this is financial advice. I have conviction in Metaplanet and strategy and in Bitcoin. I also would say if you are new to any of this information and you want to become interested in strategy and Metaplanet, I think it makes sense to uh, do some research on Bitcoin first, because if you don't really understand Bitcoin and what its role is and what it will be used for, and just how Bitcoin functions, then strategy and Metaplanet will not make sense to you. Um, But yeah, I'll say it one more time. None of this was financial advice. Thanks for clicking on the video. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know if you guys want to see more videos that are more about the treasury companies than they are about Bitcoin. Uh, I I like talking about both, so I'll try to talk about both Bitcoin and the treasury companies in my video, but sometimes I think people might just want to hear about the treasury companies even more because a lot of us understand Bitcoin. So thank you. I hope everyone has a good week and continue to stack sats and stay humble, everybody. All right.